Hey everybody, it's Michael with Asymmetrical Preparedness. As you notice, it's raining here in the Pacific Northwest. Go figure, right? It rains here all the time. So I'm out here in one of my fixed fighting positions. I've talked about this, I've shown it on video. You got the 2 logs thick with some cinder blocks in between. Does the things. But anyway, this video is about what happens if the violence spills over into suburbia, into rural areas, suburban areas, things like that. We've seen what's going on in our cities, in some of our cities, and I apologize for the rain sound. Can't do anything about that. But is it going to? We've seen them try it, right? Yes, we have. The suburbanites, the people that live there, people that live in suburbia and rural areas, what do? They show up with guns. And they're like, no, I don't think so. But what happens if they start doing that more often? And en masse? More people, in other words. And with greater resolve to do harm. So far what we've seen is limited instances where they're just marching along and the show of force was enough. Maybe law enforcement there with them. Those kind of things. But what are we going to do if people start moving out into suburban areas? This is why I talk about security-related videos. I talk about security, perimeter security, fixed fighting positions, LPOPs. But do we all have the option? No, we don't. If you live in a suburban tract home, meaning a house with like a little front yard, little backyard kind of thing with houses all around you, maybe on a cul-de-sac or something like that, what do? Well, first off, if you talk with your neighbors at all, which you should be talking with your neighbors. You should be talking to them about things like this. I'm sure they're concerned about the same things. I'm sure they don't want their, bricks thrown through their front yard or their front window. They don't want Molotovs. They don't want a bunch of people outside honking their horns, keeping them up all night, right? No, they don't. So they have the same concerns you do probably. Maybe not from a preparedness aspect, but from a reality aspect. They don't want the threat either. So talk with your neighbors. Especially if you live in like a cul-de-sac, that's in suburbia, that's the best option. Because limited access on a road. Of course they can come through people's yards, backyards, stuff like that. Yes, I get it. But so far they're not taking the hard road. They take the easy road. They just march down streets, stuff like that, block off corners. On a side note, I was going to the Tacoma Mall the other day. Pull off the freeway. Right there on the corner that I have to go through, the intersection I have to go through, was a Black Lives Matter protest. It was getting on dusk-ish, so it wasn't going crazy yet, but it was a pretty sizable group of people right there in Tacoma, next to the Tacoma Mall. Waving flags, bullhorns, screaming, yelling, walking out into traffic. They already had a vehicle blocking one lane. There's law enforcement like about a block away in all 4 directions, just sitting there watching it. That made me upset because I'm like, you guys need to do your job. You guys need to go in there. Peaceful protesting on the corner? Sure. But blocking traffic? No. Not okay. So, but they weren't. Of course, they were letting it go because they're pandering to them. Just like you see, it always happens. So, what did I have to do? I got my wife and kids with me. And I was about to do a U-turn, but I'm like, I couldn't really. Luckily, I was in my big truck, my big 1-ton truck. And of course, always had this with me, as well as several other options also. And my wife had hers. So, it ended up okay. We went through the intersection. Somebody was kind of coming up to the truck. They're waving the flag, hitting the truck with the flag and stuff like that, but not any objects. So it was okay. We were okay. But this kind of stuff is expanding. It's moving outward. Especially the closer we get to the elections, and after the elections, Trump wins. Oh my God, they're going to lose their minds, and we're going to see cities burning. We're going to see, they're going to go out to the suburban areas because we're the deplorables that they hate. We're the Nazis. We're the white supremacists. Not, but they hate us anyway. So they're going to come out to suburban and rural areas more often. So it's going to be more and more of a threat. So security, watch my security-related videos. Talk with your neighbors. Make sure you have firearms. Train on them. Get your ammo. I know it's expensive. I know it's hard to find right now, but you can still find it. Make sure you have ammo. Make sure your guns are clean. Make sure they're operational. Make sure your gear is ready to go. Make sure that you have all the security aspects in place in your house. Make sure your doors are locked. Your vehicles are locked. All the simple things. But also, like I said, talk with your neighbors. And talk to them about what happens if a group comes into your neighborhood and they start causing problems. Talk to them. How do they feel about it? What are they willing to do? Talk to them about showing, an armed show of force. That may be enough in the beginning. But then what happens? This is spiraling. It can go some bad places, some really bad places quickly. And so far we've seen when people fight back, they end up getting arrested. They're the bad guys, not the actual bad guys. So yeah, it's a tough situation to be in. But we're going to stand up, right? We're not going to let them come in and loot and riot in our neighborhoods. We have to stand up. We have to do what's right. We have to protect our neighborhoods, our areas, our families, our homes, our things, our livelihood. We have the right to do that, okay? I don't care what they say about any laws. We have the inalienable right, the God-given right to defend ourselves and our families and our neighborhoods, okay? So I get it. Yeah, I want to be law-abiding. But hey, if it spirals out of control, we got to be there. We got to be ready to respond with an appropriate level of violence. Why do I say violence and not force? That's upsetting, is that term, use of force. Use of force is a politically correct way to say use of violence. I like use of violence because it gets you up here. It makes you think, what are you doing? You are perpetrating, or you are using violence. It's not to be taken lightly. Use of force can be taken lightly. It's like, oh, it's just force. No, it's violence. So don't go there until you're ready to actually do it. Up here and what you see in front of you. Don't take it lightly. Don't blow it off. Take it seriously. If you're going to go do harm to somebody else, you better be justified. But if you are, you better be ready to do it. You better stand up. You better be ready to stand up and do the things that are needed to be done. I'm not advocating violence in any stretch of the imagination, but we have to be able to stand ready to protect ours. It will be moving more into rural areas. Suburban areas first, rural areas later, if it's not stopped. So hopefully people will stop it. They'll be willing to stand up and say, no, enough. We're not taking this BS anymore. We're not going to take our neighborhoods being burned and damaged and stuff like that. There are more of us than there are of them. I'll tell you that, okay? We see a minority of people. In all intents and purposes, it is a small group of people that is perpetrating all this violence, all this rioting, all this looting, compared to the vast citizenry of the United States. Most people are fairly level-headed. Remember the silent majority? Well, it's time to be silent no more, okay? We need to stand up. We need to do what's right. We need to counter-protest. We need to rally. Rally is for positive, right? That's when you're supporting something. Protesting is when you're against something. So rally for. I'll tell you what, there's more people in a tiny little town that's fairly close to me in Washington State. Population, I don't know, maybe 1,000 or 2. More people there every single day rallying for Trump, for blue line, blue lives matter kind of thing, for law enforcement, for a positive message, and for this country, to support this country, waving American flags, Trump's flags, blue line flags, all this stuff. There's more people there every single day during the rush hour period. They always show up there then. There's more people there every single day than I see at Biden rallies in like Chicago, New York, D.C. I'll tell you what, we are the silent majority. It's time to be silent no more. That's part of this. But part of it is to be aware of what's going on. Intelligence. We got to know what's going on, where it's going on. So keep your eyes and ears open. Keep your head on a swivel. Be ready to stand. Be ready to protect. It is going to get worse. Period. It is going to get worse. Closer we get to elections, it's always going to get worse. After the election, it's going to get worse. Trust me. I mean, it does depend on how the election goes and the period of time of said getting worse, or what direction we go. There's a lot more to that. That's a different kind of video. But anyway, you got to be aware. If you have the room, and if you're rural enough, build something like this. Fixed fighting position. This is a really redneck fixed fighting position. You know what I have for my roof? See that? That's just an old camper shell. Okay, it's an old ratty camper shell I got for free. I'm not going to put it in the back of my truck because for one thing it doesn't fit right. But it keeps the rain off me, right? It can keep me sitting here looking out at that sector, keeping an eye on things. That sector is the most likely avenue of approach to my property. So that's where I have my fixed fighting position set up. I hope you guys can, if you have the opportunity, the land, the property to do this, do things like this. Do what you can, when you can, at least. And please prep a little every day. I love you guys. I want you guys in the asset column, not the liability column. We got to stand up, though. It's time to stand up. It's time to have our voices heard. It's time to secure ours. I love you guys, and blessings to you and yours.